It is 6:30 p.m. right now, and it is 98 degrees outside.
Yeah.
It was over 100 like all day. I mean, there was a breeze today, but it was a warm breeze.
Yeah,
it was so gross.
It is genuinely disgusting here.
That is why we're doing Summerween.
So we're coming to you live from the 15th Circle of Hell to talk about Sinister, which is a horror movie from 2012. Basically, we're going to go through our general thoughts, and then I have a longer theory I want to develop about this as a fascinating Faustus story.
You know, for a change.
Yeah, well, so I started having the thoughts while we were watching this movie, and usually I try to push them away just for the sake of variety, but they kept coming, and I spent part of today working on it, and I think this one, it's really warranted.
No, it was really
this
funny.
This one's a great retelling.
Cam was like, last night he was like, I have an idea, like while we were watching. I was like, okay. He like kept pausing to write stuff down. I was like, okay, fine. And then at the end I was like, what's your idea? And what did you say? You were
the
like...
same idea I always have.
Yeah, and I said, oh my God, is it a Faust story? And you were like, no, but this time I mean it. And I was like, okay. If you're new here, Cam is deeply obsessed with Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, and he thinks that every story is also a Faust story or something.
Yeah, I've been studying and writing about Marlowe's Dr. Faustus for 10 more than 10 years now.
Yeah,
I've written books that will be published. It's weird. I know the thing that it will be in the first line of my obituary, and it's the book I wrote about Faustus, but it will find a home. And I'm almost okay with waiting, because I know it's good.
I know.
Anyway.
I know.
Yes, I know my Faustus, and I can play with it very loosely, so it should make for a fun discussion. So, general thoughts. Go watch the movie if you haven't. It's wonderful.
Please do.
It's about a writer who's a true crime writer, and he moves to a new house to work on a new case. And things go very sideways.
Yeah, very, very indeed.
So that's it. We're now free to spoil. We're probably not, but you've been warned.
Yeah.
So, general thoughts. This is world-class horror. And I think, like we alluded to before, the greatest strength of this movie is sustained tension and really smart structure. It's one of those where, like, and I think it helps that Scott Derrickson is director and one of the writers here, because those two parts of filmmaking are both executed at such a high level here and in such conversation with each other that I'm glad that the guy pointing the camera knew all of the stuff behind the scenes that he wanted to show, in the lens.
Yes.
I think sometimes when there's too much of a gulf between the writer and the director, sometimes you lose some of that subtext.
Absolutely, yeah.
But this is so focused and effective. And like The Exorcist, the movie takes the time to build up the family and establish character stakes before it goes into any spooky shit.
I don't know, because I was going to say, unlike The Exorcist, it's scary from the get-go. Like, that sustained tension is throughout. Whereas The Exorcist, I mean, you have some moments for the first half of the movie, but for the most part, it doesn't get scary till the end. This movie is scary the whole way through.
Well, maybe I misspoke. So, yeah, the movie starts with the best opening any horror movie's ever had.
Any movie's ever had.
But that opening is a hook. It's not over-explained. You don't really have any context for it.
It's not explained at all.
For a while.
Until they get to the house and you see the tree.
And I think what I mean is you delay the exposition or the explanation.
Yes.
So you can have at that point it's spectacle before you realize how plot relevant it is.
Yes. And then when he first watches the film, like, stuff is revealed over the course of it. Exactly. Like it... Well, sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow.
No, I was developing this theme in trying to structure my compliments of this movie, and I think the idea of a light touch is really important here, because when you do get the demon backstory, when you get the scene with the expert where you learn what's actually going on, the demon backstory, yeah, exactly,
it's always the woodcuts.
No, but I love woodcuts.
No, me too. I know,
and
I'm not mad about it.
I like that it's fleshed out with art and suggestion, because you're going to see the physical form of this demon, but getting the woodcuts, getting the ideas of old church theories from hundreds of years ago, it keeps it in your mind. It keeps the bad guy in your mind for a while before you see him, and that engages your imagination and kind of weaponizes your brain against you. And
this movie uses your imagination really well.
Exactly. This is a hard R horror movie, but like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, almost no blood or gore.
Yeah, I read that they were going for a PG-13 rating.
Yeah, there's no sex or violence.
Yeah, like there's like...
No, I'm sorry, not violence language or...
Yeah, there is violence, but like it's there's not a lot of blood, and a lot of the stuff is implied,
right?
Because they were trying to go for PG-13, but like it's just too disturbing, so it's R.
It's rated R because it's really fucking scary.
It's just terrifying,
right?
Yeah, but it's more scary that you don't see all the violence.
Oh, yeah.
We watched this great video where this guy was talking about Sinister and then comparing it to the sequel, which we haven't seen.
Ryan Hollinger on YouTube.
He's great. Yeah. He's got the weirdest accent ever, but he's really great.
He's awesome.
He's really cool. And he was saying, Sinister 2, one of the things that kind of makes it fall flat is it shows all the violence in like almost like a Saw hostile like way. Not that Saw are hostile or bad, but that's not the style of Sinister.
Sure.
Having that like gratuitous, like borderline torture porn stuff, like that's not how this first movie feels. It's much more implied, and therefore you're imagining more, and it's much more upsetting and disturbing.
Right. And to be fair, we haven't seen Sinister 2.
I mean that could just be...
But yeah.
I'm just regurgitating what someone else said. But
For all the talk of this movie having a light touch, it is a sweaty classic. I think it is a new classic that we are still going to be rewatching in 30 years.
Well, that's what I was going to say, was that it has a lot of those like classic horror movie tropes. Guy moves into this house with his new family, or with his family, new house, sorry. Things start happening. He finds some weird stuff. Like there's a demon. There are woodcuts. That something's happening with the kids. Like it's like all the your typical what you expect in a horror movie, but just on a different level. And it's scary from the get-go, like I was saying earlier. A lot of horror movies that are like haunted house, like demon possession thing, right? Like it's the happy family and the happy house, and then things start to go a little weird and it gets darker and darker. This movie doesn't follow like a linear progression of darkness. It starts off with the scariest thing you've ever seen and then flips back and forth.
And if you're still listening, you've seen the movie.
Yeah.
Most of the horror in this movie is communicated through the found footage tapes, those 8mm kind of home videos of the killing.
They're so good. They're so well done.
And they are very restrained. They're suggestive. The lawnmower thing. You don't see anything. You almost see something.
You barely see something.
And so many times, even when the bad stuff is actually filmed, the movie doesn't show you. The movie shows you Ellison seeing it.
Exactly. Half the time we're seeing it reflected in his glasses instead of seeing the actual thing.
Or the lawnmower, which is maybe it seems to affect him the most of any of the tapes.
Certainly affected me the most. It's the worst one.
But
you
it's
see
the one.
least.
It's the only one he fully turns away from, and he's just chugging whiskey, and you see kind of the outline in the background.
You do see him turn. Yeah, that's really great. You do see him turn away in Sleepy Time when it gets to the kid. He does turn away.
Yes.
But honestly, so Sleepy Time, if you remember, is the one where the whole family's throats are slit, and you see it happen, but like. I think you only see one for a second, and then it cuts to seeing it reflected in his glasses, so you don't see it as well. But but my point is, you see a knife cutting skin, but that is, I think, one of the less disturbing videos. I mean, it's still really upsetting.
Oh, sure.
But like something about the drowning one where they're being pulled into the pool, like that's really, I don't know. It's the combination of the poor lighting, you can't really see what's going on, the really unsettling music, and it's not normal horror movie music. Like it's not like it's none of that. It's,
a lot of it was found by the writers in really obscure stuff,
which
online.
I love.
Yeah. The trivia is worth it on IMDb. It's good.
Yeah, and it's just it's the amateur quality of it. It feels so like a real person filmed this, and that's what's so troubling.
And
about
that
it.
engages that kind of false memory like Texas Chainsaw Massacre does, where you think you see the meat hook, you think you see someone cut apart with a chainsaw. And here, you're right, the main piece of violence you see is just the throat cutting, but it's so surface level, the cut, and then I feel like the movie's almost winking at you and tricking you.
Yeah.
Because when he watches the news footage about that case, the killings are referred to as stabbings.
Yes, right. Yeah.
But we've seen them.
They were like, no, they weren't stabbed.
And you're disturbed, so you kind of go with it. But it's interesting how already your brain starts to sort of amplify it.
And even the end, when, again, big spoilers, but you're this far. No. There's a lot of blood at the end. It's all over the walls. But you don't see Ethan Hawke or the wife or the son killed by the axe, but you see the drawing that the little girl does that shows that they've been cut up by the axe. So you're so upset by that because you didn't see it happen. Like at first, like on your first view, you think, oh, she hit him in the head and he's dead, like with an axe, like one and done. She's a little girl, like she's not gonna be able to do that much, right? But then you see the drawing and you realize that she's cut the whole family into pieces.
She's also possessed.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But so I'm just saying, like it's she's overkilled,
right,
on purpose. And then you're like, oh, and then you're just left to wonder what that looks like.
Right.
Instead, all you see is the child's drawing of it.
And I think there is something fantastic and extremely technically difficult about showing all of that. I mean, a couple weeks ago we talked about Hellraiser, which practical effects wise is equally stunning to this movie, but it takes such a different approach to it.
Totally.
Even movies like Saw. I mean, Saw is basically like Texas Chainsaw or Sinister. It doesn't really show you anything. It doesn't even show the guy cut his foot off.
The first Saw does not show you much. Yeah, but it's only later when they start to show stuff.
Like when we watched the first Hostel, that's an extremely impactful, tense, powerful horror movie.
Yeah.
And that one's much more gory and in your face.
You see almost everything in that one.
So is Green Inferno. And I like a lot of those movies.
Yeah.
This one, I'm not saying it's better because it doesn't show the gore.
No. Yeah.
It just happens to do what it's doing perfectly.
Yes, right. It's achieving its goal very well. Yeah. And I think the thing I was trying to think about, like, not just what's good about this movie, because that's boring, but like what stands out about this movie.
Right.
Something that really stands out for me is the character design for Bagul. I think Bagul is one of the scariest
exactly what I was
horror
transition
creature.
into.
Oh, perfect. One of the scariest things I've ever seen is Bagul's face. Like in every iteration, when he's in behind the tree, when he's in the pool, when he's in that weird corner where he turns on the computer screen, and even when he's carrying the little girl at the end, like he's the scariest thing I've ever seen. Like that's including like the demon in The Exorcist, that's including Reagan
Pazuzu
in The Exorcist, who looks terrifying, and like all kinds of things, and even the red demon in Insidious,
the lipstick demon.
That one's pretty freaky, but like there's something really unsettling that I do not like about Bagul. It's really impressive. And it's so simple, too.
Right. Simplicity, a light touch, and I think another element of that is restraint. So most of what Bagul does, and you're right that he is just rapturous every time he's on screen, he mostly stands.
He just stands there.
He occasionally looks. Sometimes he turns his head.
Yeah.
That's it. And so the compliment we're paying to the character design is makeup and prosthetics, but it's also lighting. And I think this is kind of the beginning of the transition in the conversation here. There are almost no direct, clear shots of his face. Like most of it is in an extremely grainy 8mm film that's being zoomed in on and frozen, so you have a motion blur on it.
And he's also at the bottom of a pool, so the water's messing up what he actually looks like. Yeah, like you don't see him clear, like head on up close until the very end. Right. And that's very brief. And even then it's dark in the room that he's in.
And you don't get an explanation about him. You get a little bit of the legend of the demon from the expert.
The lore, But
that doesn't tell you anything about the character.
Right.
Like you don't know his personality or motivations or desires or anything.
Apart from eating children.
Right. And he's not given a sympathetic origin story. It's not like the second It movie where you get the flashback to Pennywise like ripping his face apart and him without the makeup on. You don't get those moments. You don't see Michael Myers escaping
because Bagul's not a human. He's just this deity thing that's existed for all of time.
And I think that's extremely important. They're keeping him distant, so he remains terrible. He's silent. He doesn't talk, which we've just watched the first couple Friday the 13th movies, and something that really stuck with me in those is Jason not talking at all. Yeah. Because even with Michael Myers, even if he doesn't talk, people talk about him and he has enough backstory that there is character there.
Exactly. He is a character. He's not just this shape, even though that is what he's called, which is funny.
And Jason is sort of scary in a different way. And here I love that Bagul doesn't talk. You don't get the obligatory deep voice with all the vocal effects on it.
Yeah, which would be scary, and like I would be fine with it if it happened. I'd be like, that's really effective, but I think it's even cooler that he doesn't talk.
Right. And when the one piece of lore that we get about him is that he possesses people who watch the footage of him, him being silent and all his only actions in the movie being looking and turning, it keeps him ever present.
Yes.
It means that he's always in that spectator position where he's watching you.
Yes.
He's watching the movie. He's right behind you.
Right.
It's really effective, and it kind of works the longer you think about it. And in the moment, you don't question it. You're absolutely immersed.
Yeah.
All of his actions are practical. There aren't any big... He doesn't fly across a room.
No.
He doesn't levitate. He doesn't have
spider
wings.
crawl or
he doesn't
anything.
shapeshift. And again, to go back to it, the thing that sort of lost me was Pennywise shapeshifting into that big clown spider thing at the end of the second one. Because it didn't feel like the character anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the scorpion and the snake are different forms of Bagul, but I don't think shapeshifting is the right word to use for what's happening there, because it's less physical than that. It's much more like...
Omens?
Yeah, like it's not like... Because when he steps on the scorpion at the beginning, he doesn't kill Bagul, obviously.
No.
Like, it's more that that's just demonstrating his presence, but it's much more like ethereal and metaphysical than like being actually physically turning into these things.
Yeah, it was like seeing the Grimm before Sirius Black.
Yeah,
or
right.
it was like, I mean, at this point in sort of culture, seeing a snake and knowing that there's a satanic implication there.
Yeah, right.
And then when you get the biblical kind of source for Bagul's legend, that makes more sense.
Yes,
but it's also just a really well shot freaky scorpion because it's in such poor lighting. Again, the lighting is so to the credit of the creature design here.
Well, yeah, and now I'm remembering also, like, when, just to add to your point, when Bagul at the end goes into the film, you don't see him like travel into the screen. It just cuts and he's in there.
Right.
Like, he's gone from the room and he's in the film instead. And that's much more effective, I think, and it feels more believable than like actually seeing it physically happening, because that just looks silly.
And he's
like he's
eerie.
blue skadoobing into there, you know?
Right. He's unnerving.
Yeah,
but ever present.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing that bothers you is that he's there. It's not anything he's doing, because he's not jumping at the camera. He's not doing it.
He's
just
not attacking you.
Standing
He's just there, and that's the worst part.
And the first kind of hook that to transition into the larger point I'm going to make here.
Yeah.
He reminded me. It was like a really dark reading, a really brutal representation of Banquo at the feast in Macbeth.
Cool. Tell me more about that.
When Banquo is, after he's been killed, his ghost appears.
Spoiler for Macbeth.
His ghost appears at the feast and sits in Macbeth's chair.
Yeah.
So he can't sit down, but he can't tell other people there's a ghost in the room.
Yeah.
So it's just this thing that like sticks in his head.
Yeah.
It's the monkey wrench in the machine where the gears can't turn. So he can't address it, and the longer it's there, the more upsetting it is. So I feel like Bagul felt like a really fucked up Banquo to me.
Well, also Scorpion's on my mind. What's the context of that quote?
It's
what
him
talking about?
To Lady Macbeth, I think, about all the plots and sort of it's the effect of prophecy and whether or not it's inevitable.
Cool.
That he will die and Banquo's kids will rule.
Okay. Well, that's perfect.
It's that like cancerous effect of prophecy unfulfilled.
Which is great because Bagul like follows this like circular, cyclical, almost prophecy like series of events.
Sure.
Like that's how he exists. Is like you get the kid, they move to the next house, you get the next kid, etc. So that makes a lot of sense.
So following that Banquo thought a little bit further, watching it the second time, I think I was able to pay attention to the craft of it and how perfectly rendered this thing is. I mean, technically, the writing, the directing, the acting, the editing, the lighting.
Ethan Hawke is so good.
All of it. It's just, it's one of those perfect horror movies, for me at least, and I think for you.
Yeah.
But it also, the more I watched it after this little seed was planted in my head, it felt like a stage production. There is hyper dramatic lighting throughout.
Yes.
And most of the shots, the backgrounds disappear into darkness.
I know.
Like a curtain.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, so much at the time I was like, Ethan, turn the damn lights on. Why are you sitting in the dark?
Exactly. And I made that joke to you because I like to have one light source in a room. And to exist mostly in darkness.
Yeah, I'll come home and it's like it's like all the curtains are drawn. Cam's sitting with a single little light on. I'm like, Cam, it's 5 p.m. What are you doing?
But I liked seeing that, and I think it made sense narratively here because he usually had one light on in his office, and that's a perfect echo to the found footage scenes where the one light source, because all of them are at night. You know, you're going through like the family strapped down the garage or whatever it is.
Yeah,
there's this light coming from the camera.
Yes,
it's almost like when they have like the flashlight attached to the gun.
Yeah,
it's like that. That's kind of the clumsy lighting that these old cameras had. So you have that one focused light source.
Yeah.
But it has the effect visually of a theater spotlight.
Totally. Yes.
Where again the backgrounds are disappearing into blackness. It's almost like the laser focus you have watching Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah.
Because so many of those shots, and the director of photography has talked about this. So many of those shots, whatever object is happening that matters is perfectly centered. So you can almost keep your eyes in one place.
That's really cool.
And the thing keeps punching you. And that's why the sense of the inertia in that movie is so delirious and incredible.
Oh, cool.
I think there's such a constant visual language in this movie with those disappearing backgrounds, with that singular light focus, that you end up blurring the line between these horrifying found footage scenes and the almost the safety scenes of the movie.
Absolutely.
Because once he stops watching the film, or whatever, home movie he just found, you have that exhale. It's like, okay, things are okay for a minute.
Yeah.
He's upset, but I can breathe.
Yeah, the scary movie's not on anymore. Yeah.
And the longer it goes, the more you blur those lines.
Yes, right. Because at first it's like, and we talked about this when we first talked about this film, because we were talking about the day-night cycle, which Tolkien loves to use. At first it's like, okay, at night he watches the films and it's scary, and then it's daytime and it's light outside and he's having coffee and he's talking to his wife and it's like normal, happy family, right? Like with problems, but like nothing scary.
Right.
And it's like, okay, and then it gets dark outside and then he's in his office. You're like, okay, it's about to be scary. And it's that back and forth. But as it goes on, he starts watching stuff during the day. Creepy things start happening during the day and at night, and it all just gets muddled and muddled and muddled. Yeah.
And on a rewatch, you realize that from the very first scene of the family being hung in the backyard during daytime, you should know that you're never safe.
Yeah.
Never mind every time they're having a cute family conversation eating cereal.
Yes.
And you can see the suicide tree through the
in
window
the background.
in the backyard.
I know. Well, and that's one of my, again, like this movie like does the trope things of the haunted house, of the family, of the whatever.
Yeah.
But then it subverts and it plays with your expectations. Like so often when you're watching a horror movie and there's some weird object that's causing mayhem, you're just screaming at the screen, burn it, like put it in a fire and burn it and you'll be fine. And Ethan Hawke does that to the camera.
Right.
And you're also like, leave the house, like literally go to a hotel. What are you doing? This house is obviously haunted. They do that. They leave the house, but none of it works.
Right.
Like, and in fact, the act of leaving the house, of trying to burn the camera, actually makes it worse and escalates it. And that's really interesting to me.
So that's a good transition here. I've really noticed something in the watching this the week after Funny Games, because Funny Games is shot very differently than this, but also kind of similarly. In one respect, they both have very, very long shots.
That's true.
Even when they don't, they feel long.
Yeah.
Because the reason that horror, I think, speaks to me in 2022 in a way that no other genre does, because, well, they don't make comedies anymore, and action movies are all frantic, like YouTube editing of just extremely quick cuts and explosions and shit that you can't even pay attention to. And my brain just kind of like numbs over, and I have to like hold on to the armrests. But I think horror ages better and appeals to someone who's such a loser for Marlowe and Shakespeare, because it feels the most like that timeless brand of stage acting, where you're literally acting. Like, you're not just reading lines. You're not just saying lines or quips or whatever Marvel shit. You're just... And I know that these guys made Doctor Strange, which was good. But so I'm not disparaging Marvel in that sense.
Okay.
But I think horror, it engages the audience. It doesn't just engage your imagination. When you're watching... In Funny Games, when you're watching him try to blow dry the phone so they can call the police to escape, it's so meat and potatoes, where you've done that. I mean, I've dropped my phone in a pool. I was pushed in the pool, but it's a different story. But
were you tied to a lawn chair?
I've had that experience. You can think of trying to escape the house.
Yeah.
Or why would you go in there?
Yeah.
Like it's so practical, it's so simple, it's so human. And you're watching people walk through rooms. You're watching people walk slowly down a hallway because they hear something and then they stop. And if you watched it without sound, maybe the 2-minute scene would be guy walks through a hallway.
Yeah, like, okay,
But
cool.
there's so much art to it. There's so much humanity that you can
Right.
see all the senses firing. It's not just the shot of the robot turning back into the truck, turning back into the robot.
Yes, you are so much more involved, I think, in horror than you are in other genres. Not
Right.
that you aren't involved in the story in other genres, but
No.
horror just does it in a really special way that is hard to replicate in
Right.
other genres.
There is a humanity and sense of calm that I don't think any other genre really has right now. Watching people move, act, not having crazy editing, it makes large portions of the movie feel like they're happening in real time.
Yeah.
Instead of it being this greatest hits of an extraordinary event.
Right, exactly, yeah. Because, I mean, the events of Sinister probably take place over a couple weeks.
Right.
Like, when things are really starting to ramp up, it's like, she's like, we've been here a week. The wife says that. And, you know, because he's watching like one film a day and there are like 5 of them. So it doesn't take place over that long. And you're watching the films in real time.
Right.
The length of the films is what you see on the screen. It's not like you're seeing a recap of what he saw. So yeah, you're like experiencing it along with him, which is really interesting. And in some cases, you're even ahead of him because you see the first film before he does.
Right.
So you and you see the tree and you recognize it, but he also knows that it's the family, so you're kind of on equal footing anyway. So anyway, it's just really fascinating.
One of the other ways that it reminds me of a theater performance or a stage production is the style of dialogue, where it's pretty spare. It's one of those movies where you follow the protagonist pretty rigorously. Ethan Hawke is in, I think, every scene.
He's in every scene, yeah,
But-
except for the actual snuff films.
Right, but there's
But he's watching
even
them.
that you're over his shoulder,
Yeah,
basically.
right.
And his dialogue's good, his character's developed well, but there are long stretches of time where he's not talking.
Yeah.
And when you extend that idea or that lens out to the other characters, you see how spare the dialogue is,
Yeah.
but memorable.
Yeah.
And this is a very small cast, but everyone's doing very serious work. Like, look at Tracy, who is Ellison's wife. The escalation of their marriage and the stakes of their marriage and where their relationship is right now. The first scene you really get with her is her support of Ellison. Then you get an argument. Then you get an ultimatum. It's all perfectly intricately paced. And in context, like zooming out, even the small scale characters feel like they have full and dramatic arcs. They can have full Shakespearean betrayals and love stories. But if you like counted the lines, they only have 3 or 4 appearances. I mean, Trevor, one of the 2 kids in the movie of the principal 4 characters.
Yeah.
You get a scene with him talking about the night terrors. Then you get 2 scenes where he's having night terrors, and you never see him again.
Yeah.
That's it. And
Yeah.
it's so effective. It's so ruthless in the editing of it, and the movie has such a death grip on what it wants to do
Right.
and exactly where it wants your attention to be.
Right.
That you don't question it at the end and say, we didn't see Trevor that much in the last half hour.
Well, especially because the snuff films, the things that happen in them are about families being murdered. And so you're thinking about the family, and Ethan Hawke's character Ellison is thinking about his children and his wife and his family. And so as you're watching all this happen, as you're watching another little kid get killed, and you're watching him like try and figure out and try to stop it from happening to his family, you're constantly thinking about the son, Trevor, even if he's not in many scenes. So it makes a lot of sense. It's very effective.
You're so in Ellison's perspective that you, as much as you are projecting your own experience or, I would run out of the house immediately, as much as you're doing that onto him, you know he's doing that onto these families with his family.
Yes,
so you're even closer to his perspective.
Right.
You're even more closely tied to how he's reacting to all of these horrible things.
He's watching his own horror film that he's trying to not have happen to him, that you're also watching. It's
and
great.
then by the end of the movie, when you've had all these arcs developed really quickly and quietly in the background, you get a Shakespearean blowout of an ending.
Yep.
Where, I mean, Deputy So-and-so is Horatio at the end of Hamlet.
Yeah.
And everyone else in Hamlet is dead.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And I know that he leads the sequel,
Yeah.
which is a pretty beautiful way of continuing Hamlet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because his character was fleshed out so well. Mm-hmm. So, let's jump into Faustus.
Now we're finally, how far in are we into the episode?
32.
We're finally going to talk about, dear God.
Well, no, I think that was fun.
No, I know.
There are other things to talk about than Marlowe.
Yeah.
So, Sinister as a Faustus story. Mm-hmm. A lot of hallmark moments are present here, the beats of that tale, but there's a fun twist on the proceedings. And I'm going to recap the Faustus stuff where
I was
it's
about to
necessary.
say, should
so
you do
Faustus,
that? Okay.
And I've talked about this in the past, but Faustus is the quintessential summoned a demon story. Mm-hmm. Bargaining your soul, signing away the contract.
Deal with the devil.
Deal with the devil. Mm-hmm. You try to get out of the deal, and then at the end you lose, and the devil drags you to hell. Mm-hmm. So there's that basic shape here, but the pivots away from it are, I think, the more fascinating parts here. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of the tragedy of Macbeth, the Coen brother Macbeth, black and white, from a couple months ago.
We did an episode
on, which you guys really seem to like.
Yes, that one's done very well. Yeah.
So that one, kind of, the twist on that classic tale was, what if Macbeth and Lady Macbeth were old? Mm-hmm. The Fassbender Macbeth from 5 or 6 years ago is, what if they were young parents whose kid just died? Mm-hmm. And that, like, grief and trauma in that, prime of their life, that reshapes the paranoia. It gives an extra level of emotional devastation to the prophecy about them not having any future kings. It really reshapes the play in a fascinating way.
Yeah.
And here, what seems like the initial twist is, what if Dr. Faustus had a family? Okay. And you see by the end game, as you learn more and more about the demon and that he borrows one of the kids when he massacres a family, that adjustment is crucial to how this story plays out.
Yeah.
And it ends basically with the implications of that change to the lore, where you have the daughter killing the rest of the family and then going off with the demon. Mm-hmm. So sketching out some of the basic Faustus framework here. Faustus is an old professor, and Mephistopheles is the demon who signs away his soul, right? Mm-hmm. He's the one who seduces him until the contract is signed.
Yes.
And they form this, uneasy relationship.
Yeah.
Begul is our Mephistopheles here. Mm-hmm. He is a demon preying on an advanced, frustrated, late-stage academic. Ellison repeatedly references his objections to writing more journalism textbooks. Mm-hmm. He is a burnt-out academic, just like Faustus is.
Yeah, okay.
And where Mephistopheles gives Faustus new experiences in his chosen field, in that case, it's a theologian who gets to see the afterlife and definitive proof that Christianity is true and that all of this stuff exists, that he's been, developing proofs and hypotheses for decades.
He gets career success.
Well, it's also just you resolve eternal questions. Like, I mean, I have a degree in philosophy. I've studied it a long time. I had to come to terms with, and I think professors do a good job of this nowadays, of telling you there are no answers to these questions.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're here for, find a religion.
Figure it out. Yeah.
I mean, basically, if you look at Christian theology, that's studying a set of answers to some eternal questions.
Yeah.
I prefer to study the questions.
Yes.
With the total certainty that I will never know the answers.
Right.
And that's sort of, to translate that back into the model we were talking about, Mephistopheles gives Faustus proof. Mm-hmm. He gives him the experiences of what does hell and heaven look like, and what does Lucifer look, those kind of confirmations. Yeah. But it's also just the idea of proof and certainty, which is so elusive to that sort of academic. Mm-hmm. Here, Ellison is a true crime writer who's given a new and fascinating case. Mm-hmm. I mean, in his attic, he's literally delivered boxes of evidence and tapes that are connective tissue between old murders. Basically, and this is Begul perfectly tailoring this seduction to Ellison's character. He's giving him all the pieces of a Lego set without the instructions, because he knows the puzzle is the thing that motivates Ellison.
Yes.
In the same way, Faustus can go for decades not knowing the answers, because the questions do have appeal to him. And that's the thing, in both cases, that the demon is preying on. So this is another term for this is a honeypot, the thing you can't resist, right? And then Winnie the Pooh gets stuck in the doorway, and we know where that goes.
Yes.
The
Getting
contract.
eaten by a demon, apparently.
Yes, Rabbit's the demon.
That's the new Winnie the Pooh movie that's coming out.
So Faustus signs a contract ultimately for his soul.
Yeah.
For the term of 27 years that he will get full access to the cosmos, basically, with Mephistopheles as his guide. The only, if you're looking at Sinister and saying, where is the contract that Ellison signs? The contract is either his future book deal for the book that we know is never written.
Yeah.
Or rewatching the first 20 minutes of this movie as they arrive in this new town, we repeatedly discuss him signing his books for all the police officers. And he signs the book for Deputy so-and-so. And you could say that consecrates him in this moment.
Cool.
And after that moment, he is screwed.
Is there also an argument about like he keeps promising to his daughter that they'll leave if they don't like it after a while, like after they sell the book, or because he makes that promise like 3 or 4 times, I feel like.
That would be more that it's dependent on the future book deal.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm
not arguing that.
I'm riffing.
Yeah, no, and both of those interpretations are there.
Yeah.
So I
or
like
even
that.
even him accepting the box of tapes.
And
like,
even,
you know?
Exactly. He's almost signing for a delivery.
He could have just let them there. It wasn't
right.
It wasn't the existence of the tapes that awakened Bagul. It was the turning on the Super 8 camera and watching them.
And when they're pulled over by the sheriff as they're trying to leave town at the end, he's the little joke as they drive off is, I don't need your signature.
Yeah.
Because he's not giving them the ticket because he's happy that they're leaving.
Yeah.
But that's another reference to the signature. It's fun that you obscure such a classic moment in this sort of story. So then we kind of have to hunt for it. And there are all these little almost red herrings of where it could live.
Yeah, right.
Other little hints? Ellison is asked early on in the movie, what on earth possessed you to move here?
Yeah.
And I think that's fun as sort of a wink and a nod to the reference of demonic possession. Or this relationship with the demon that develops. But looking at it after watching the movie twice, it's almost a thesis statement. Like, isn't that the tragedy of this story and Dr. Faustus? Nothing ever possesses Ellison. No demon ever possesses him.
Yeah, he's never possessed, yeah.
No demon ever possesses Faustus. They both know demons. They see them. They study them. Ellison pins up pictures on his wall. But the only thing either man is ever possessed by is curiosity. And that's why the movie feels so real. It's like what we were talking about before with horror. This is the kind of horror movie where you understand and identify with the main character. They're not making illogical decisions. They're not on the run from a crazed chainsaw-wielding maniac, and they run into the abandoned garage full of more chainsaws.
Yeah.
There's none of that dumbness here.
No.
It's all impulses and weaknesses that you can identify with.
Human reactions.
Exactly. So it's
just like Ellison's like fall from grace is, originally his motivations for writing these books was, well, these people deserve to have their stories told. I love writing. It's my passion. Like, I would rather cut off my hand than write a book for money.
Yes.
And then by the end, he's only motivated by the success and the fame and the money that he'll get from writing the book.
And I will get to that in a bit.
Okay, great.
But no, that's a great thing to introduce. There's also, we've talked about this in terms of Tolkien. We talked about for a year and a half. The first sit-down scene with the deputy establishes Ellison. It's really the only time he talks about religion. It establishes him as a non-believer. But
him being Ellison.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he's also enraptured by the possible evidence of something supernatural, something beyond his understanding.
Yeah.
He's fascinated by that, even if it goes against his beliefs. He's not that stubborn. He's not that close-minded that he just discounts the sound of running in the attic. He's still interested in it. And that does speak to a wholeness of character. I think that speaks very well of him. Ultimately, doesn't work out great, but I think it's a nice character moment. But the contrast, the foil in that scene, Deputy So-and-so, he's quietly set up as a cautious believer. And he becomes this prophetic character. And in that, Deputy So-and-so becomes the old man character.
Yeah.
And the old man character is a trope we've talked about from Elizabethan theater that is carried on through. You have, in Julius Caesar, you have the Ides of March, the guy who's screaming basically the end of the movie at the characters trying to warn them. And that element of prophecy, of being ignored or some mark of arrogance keeping the protagonist from listening to the advice. It's an interesting trope that is kind of reacted to and insisted upon in that age of fiction. And here you have the most gentle character in the movie occupy that. But where that old man trope is an idea that comes up in a bunch of plays, sometimes it's a named character.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's, I mean, in Richard III, there's an old woman who says a lot of these warnings.
Yeah.
But she's an actual character. Why I love Marlowe is that his old man is called Old Man.
And Deputy So-and-so is called
Has no
Deputy
name.
So. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even in the IMDb credits, he's just called Deputy.
Yeah, I think in the second one, he's called Deputy So-and-so.
Right. And for me, that's another little Marlowe nugget that made me very happy.
I love that. It's like the movie knows that he's a trope, and so they just let it be what it is.
The maybe the most famous and important scene from Faustus, after he's signed the contract, after he's gotten to know Mephistopheles, there's that fun lull of the last couple acts before his contract is due, and he tries to sneak out of it, and he gets killed anyway. The best moment in that lull is the parade of the 7 deadly sins. And in Dr. Faustus, this is Lucifer's arrival. This is where you see him on stage in the play, and you see all these characters embodying the deadly sins. And it almost feels like a cautionary tale at that point. We know Faustus is screwed. He already signed the contract. There's no getting out of that. I mean, he signed it in his own blood. He's screwed.
Yeah.
But there's this... It still feels like a warning when you have a character embodying one of these avoidable pitfalls of sins, right? That you can avoid lust. It all feels like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But here, the parade of the deadly sins in Sinister, it's the tapes.
Yeah.
And you see all of these absolute horrors, and they are not a cautionary tale. They are embodiments of evil.
They're not saying don't get drowned by a demon kid.
And
you can't do anything about it.
Right. And the fascinating kind of reframing in this movie is that that parade is catnip for Ellison. That's the thing that keeps him hooked.
Yeah.
It doesn't scare him off. If anything, it's the closest thing to evidence he gets.
Yeah. I mean, that's the catalyst. That's what gets him excited. That's like what gets him going down the rabbit hole. Because
if you're looking at that idea of Faustus seeing proof, seeing a demon means Christianity, or means at least something's true, and eventually seeing Lucifer, I guess that kind of ties it up.
Probably.
But we see Bagul at the end. We see a pretty clear shot of him behind the daughter, and then he walks away into the camera footage.
Yeah.
Ellison never sees that. He's cut into pieces by then.
No.
So the closest he ever sees, especially of Bagul, is through those tapes.
Yeah.
And I was always fascinated that Lucifer only had that one appearance in all of Dr. Faustus.
Yeah.
And I like that even though this version of Lucifer, this demon, Bagul, has multiple appearances to us, he only has that one to Ellison.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he does see him in the yard way in the distance.
Sure.
But barely. Yeah, I mean, exactly. He never has a interaction or a confrontation with him.
And as we flesh out the lore and we learn about all of these dead kids that get kind of stolen away by Bagul, those revelations start to integrate into the story. And we see those ghost kids following Ellison around the house, causing all of the freaky noises and stumblings.
Exactly.
But he never sees them.
Yes, he can't see them. Yes, right. Just like we see the footage at the beginning of the movie and Ellison doesn't see it till later.
And that's even more of the tragedy of it, that he doesn't get that proof. He doesn't get that resolution that he seems to be hunting for because he wants to resolve this case. So, jumping to the end game, Faustus is dragged down to hell. A portal opens up. He tries to barter at the last moment. Doesn't work. Dragged down to hell. You see a little bit of fire. Gone. Much of that happens here, but in a different way. Ellison dies in front of a fire.
That's true.
After trying to bargain his way out of death and giving up on his case, like publicly giving up on writing the book in front of his family, in front of his enemies, the sheriff.
Yeah.
And
leaving the house.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he's surrendering the thing that's giving him this metaphysical validation.
Yes, he's trying to give the contract back. He says to his wife, I'm not going to write the book anymore. And they think it's all going to be fine now.
And we know he's screwed. We know there's
it's
no
too late.
bartering anymore.
Especially because the old man keeps calling him to tell him that he's messed up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the old man appears at the very, very end for Faustus, right before he's ripped down to hell.
Cool.
He has that last little appearance and effort where he tries to tell him to repent, and we know he's screwed.
Yes.
There's an echo here to Faustus's the last line that Faustus has in the play. He's pleading to Mephistopheles and offering up anything he can to try to invalidate this contract. And the last thing he can think of is, I'll burn my books. And the first scene you get with Faustus in the play is him trashing his library. It's him frustrated with all of these books that he's poured himself into, that he's dedicated his life to, the things they can't give him.
Yeah.
The first thing we see in Sinister is the tapes. And Ellison tries to burn the tapes.
Yes,
He does the, I'll burn my books. We see him throw them in the fire pit,
Yes.
literally. But
He also tries to stop writing his actual book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it works. The echo works on two levels. We've seen it literally in the fire pit with the film tape, but we've also seen him give up on writing his book and building his precious legacy, which he references a couple times through the film. And that's the most kind of damnable arrogance. When we talk about Julius Caesar or Macbeth or Hamlet or any of the big tragedies of that era, it was always greed. That was like the thing that, they deserve what they got because they were a little greedy.
It's the hubris,
Exactly. That's always the cardinal sin here.
Yes.
And we see bits of that with Ellison, but this is the last thing I want to jump into.
Okay.
The very last line of the play, after Faustus is dead, the last line of the play is in a chorus, which kind of closes it out and gives a little epilogue here.
Yeah.
It is a almost editorial, direct, summary condemnation of Faustus for, quote, practicing more than heavenly power permits. And early on in Sinister, we establish sort of an acceptable level of ambition when we're watching this golden age footage of Ellison.
Yeah.
Fascinating that we see footage of him on shitty versions of home movies, and then we see really shitty old home movies of those other families.
Yep.
But he sort of states his very pure and acceptable and relatable goals of bringing injustice to light and helping the police solve crimes. The police are good. They're not all bad, but sometimes they get something wrong and maybe we can help. He's very magnanimous. It's very pure.
Yeah.
And I love that it cuts between young Ellison and then this older, bearded, bad posture Ellison who's like sneering at himself.
Yes, just like, ugh.
For like sucking up to the cops. When we know that the cops try to run him out of every town he moves to.
He hates the cops, exactly. Yeah, His wife has to beg him to be nice to him. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and he beats himself up for reaching beyond that point. And that's sort of the sadness after he watches these kind of videos of him on the talk show circuit.
Yeah.
He beats himself up. And so much of this is done beautifully by Ethan Hawke without any dialogue.
No, it's just his face.
And he knows that he's working from a selfish place now. Yes, there's the element of providing for his family and making a bunch of money and buying a new, but they're okay.
They're paying 2 mortgages. I think they're fine.
But he knows that.
And their old house is a really nice house.
Right. And Tracy points that out too.
Yes.
That he's not coming from a pure moralistic place.
Yeah, she's like, you're just doing this for yourself.
Right.
Like, this isn't about us anymore.
There's greed, there's fame, fortune, avarice, and he even references movie deals in the talk show circuit.
Yes.
And you could argue those things are practicing more than heavenly power permits.
Right, exactly.
Because the saintly method of, I just want to, gosh darn, I just want to bring injustice to light.
Especially because his Kentucky Blood book was super successful.
Right.
And so the wife is like, what if, like, that's it? Like, you've already done the thing. You've already had the great breakthrough big book. And he's like, no, I want more.
He wants more.
And he's not satisfied, so he wants more, and that's the hubris. That's
practicing more than heavenly power permits. That last line,
too close to the sun.
If I were ever to get a tattoo, it would be that. Because I talk about and think about that one line constantly.
Would you get it on your butt cheek? Like, where would you get it?
Yes, both butt cheeks.
Okay, got it. Practicing more.
One would be mirrored. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, ooh.
It's a work in progress.
Okay, got it.
And I think we're sort of stumbling into this last point pretty well. Like with Faustus, Ellison's punishment here of being hacked to pieces by his daughter and then presumably dragged away to hell, right? If it was done in service of a demon, he's not going to a nice place.
Well, he's a pagan deity, so there's no hell in that canon.
Either way, it is not a happy ending.
I'm just saying.
I don't think this man wanting a possible movie deal is worth what happens to him at the end.
No, not so much. I'm just saying hell is a Christian invention, but anyway.
But, I mean, we talked about the old church with Bagul, and we don't know if Bagul is actually part of some sort of Christian theology.
Yeah.
There's an implication, since the knowledge that we have of him in the film
they keep saying pagan, so no, by definition.
Maybe, but there might be some corollary that they're pulling from.
I suppose. It all gets muddled. All religion gets muddled into each other.
No, but
and much of Christian religion is pulled from pagan mythology.
But I think there is a sort of Christian commonality to the movie.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's the library we're pulling from.
Yeah,
for the lore and language.
Yeah,
and
because the Western world has now interpreted this old thing through a Christian lens. So,
right,
yeah.
and it's also that understanding of demons. It's that tradition of demons in American horror movies.
Yeah.
I think there's a fairly kind of Christian framework there.
You're right. I'm just saying I don't think there's hell in this scenario.
My
not
point
hell
is
as
that
we
the
know
punishment the punishment does not fit the crime.
Yes.
And the feeling we get at the end is a sense of unease and injustice at what happens to Ellison.
Oh, yeah. Like, he didn't deserve that. Like,
and that's all I was trying to say, darling.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be pedantic for fun. No, but yeah, it's like he shouldn't have been writing that book in that way, but he didn't deserve to be chopped to pieces by his daughter. Yeah.
And like we talked about before, that's the thing. That's where Bagul got him. That's the weakness he saw and then preyed upon. Human weakness and flaws. And the story, these stories, both of them, Dr. Faustus and Sinister, it's demons punishing temptation with eternal damnation and torture.
Yes.
Which, to me, seems a little lopsided if we're organizing the scales of justice.
Just a little,
It doesn't quite work out. Because those flaws and weaknesses in Faustus, in Ellison, those are what allow us to relate to them and understand them.
Exactly. Those are very human impulses.
Right.
It's not like... I was thinking about the deal with the devil thing, and I was like, why do we like this so much? Why do we like these types of... Why do we like Faust stories? And I think part of it is because we want to see the fantasy play out of somebody getting everything they want, but also facing the consequences so that you can act out both fantasy scenarios of getting everything you want and also reaping the consequences without actually having to experience either. And the things that these people want are not crazy things. They're not doing, like, it's not insane to want success. It's not insane to want answers to questions that you have. It's not insane to want to provide for your family and to solve a crime and to, like, be good at your job. Like, that's not anything insane that anybody wants, but still, like, we like get to see it play out, and like makes you feel better about yourself a little bit, because you're like, well, I would never do that. But then, like, when it's executed the way it is in something like Sinister, where he had pretty human reactions, he thought to burn the tapes, he thought to leave the house, he stopped writing the book, and he tried to do good, and he still didn't. He still dies at the end.
Right.
It's like a sad.
But I don't think anyone's walking out of the theater saying, well, good. He got what he deserved.
Well, exactly.
Order is restored.
That's what I mean. So it's like watching this horrible car accident, but you're like, oh no. And so you kind of feel vulnerable and like, it doesn't matter what you do, this could still happen to you.
But you leave the theater, in both cases, siding with the Faustus character. And this is the fundamental thing. This deal with the devil story has been told throughout history. Goethe did one in Germany. There's this English Faustbuch that it was pulled from initially when it was translated from German. It's been in billions of stories since then. The temptation, the seduction, the contract, all of these famous scenes that almost they can subliminally work their way into movies that even aren't explicitly Faustus stories. I mean, and I don't think this one was.
I mean, even The Witch at the end, it's just, do you want to have butter and a nice dress? Right. And she's like, yeah, that sounds demon, great.
It sniffed out her weakness and played to it.
Yeah.
And it leaves you siding with Thomas, and maybe even more, because you know how achievable and meager and humble those desires were.
And her reactions to how her family has treated her were so normal and human, and you just feel sorry for her.
And that curveball, that switch, that turning of the tables at the last second is the absolute masterstroke that Marlowe brings to this legend. And that is what I spot in Faustus stories. It's this Marlowe curveball, because the demons are at the bottom of the food chain, right? So if they can, weasel their way into the world and calibrate all of the weaknesses of this person and then play to those weaknesses and corrupt them and get them to screw themselves and then torture and punish them forever. That doesn't seem fair. And within whatever Christian framework you're working in, if they're at the bottom of the food chain, then there's someone up top who's not intervening. And the mastery of Marlowe, writing in the 1590s, where this explicit conversation that we're having right now would get you thrown in prison,
literally,
or killed, or exiled,
burned at the stake.
He does that table turn while condemning his character in the last line.
Yes.
That's his final statement. That's what he's leaving you with. I have so many copies of Faustus piled up because I like the commentaries. I like the different versions of it, the footnotes. And the one that has stuck with me so much is this beaten to shit old red copy that I have. And the blurb on the back is this scholar saying, in the end, I'm paraphrasing, in the end, Christian theology is proved victorious, right? The sinner is punished and dragged down to heaven. But
to hell.
Marlowe, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
But Marlowe gives Faustus all the best lines.
Yeah,
And that, I think that's the most gorgeous part about this, that it doesn't matter what happens at the ending. That's not the commentary. That's not what he wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
If anything, he's telling a challenging, subversive story, like John Milton did with Paradise Lost, making Satan a human, flawed, understandable, relatable character. They're telling that story with one hand behind their back while loudly signposting the opposite message of what they're saying.
Yes.
That's absolute mastery.
Yes,
That's storytelling under fire. That's the wink at you. It's the absolute mastery. And when you get a Faustus story like this, executed so perfectly at every level, it does evoke that just perfect snap of a curveball landing into a glove. It's so good because it begs those uncomfortable questions. And I think great art keeps you thinking and questioning on the way home, whether it's on the way home from the theater, whether it's in the days after you rent a movie for the second time instead of just buying it.
Why didn't we just buy it?
And you're seeing what you're left with and what you're left thinking about. Who didn't show up? God doesn't show up in either of these stories.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Could he have?
Yeah.
What's the order of operations?
Right, because there are lots of demon possession stories where God's a huge part of it, and that's how they're trying to combat it.
He makes a direct appeal to the person that has condemned themselves, and maybe they try to atone for what they've done, and then God looks like a good. But what happens if he doesn't show up?
Yeah.
How do you think of him then? These are the provocations that have gotten people slaughtered for thousands of years and in the current day.
Yeah.
So the reaction that you would get to Marlowe in the 1590s, that you would get to John Milton writing Paradise Lost, that sort of fear and hatred, that environment still exists.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And when you release a horror movie to a mainstream audience that is playing on thousands of screens across the country, that has to make millions of dollars back for it not to ruin the people involved, their careers.
Yes.
You're almost threading the same needle.
Totally, yeah.
You aren't directly going to be imprisoned. But you still have to throw a curveball.
Right. Well, and you're appealing to this came out in 2012. You're appealing to people who are all feeling the effects of the 2008 crash. No one can provide for their family like they used to be able to. That's why this is so impactful. That's why Breaking Bad came out at just the right time, because it was a man who couldn't afford to provide for his family.
Right.
And that's how it all unravels. And so it's about people dealing with that and wanting to be successful and having things taken away from them and feeling justified in their anger and their spite and their bitterness, right? And then instead it all falls apart. But so you feel sympathetic towards this guy who makes a mistake, but maybe doesn't quite
And what happens when you fully and forever condemn human weakness and flaws? There's no one left to throw a stone. Everyone's in a glass house.
Right.
It has this fascinating effect. And I think you enter this sort of timeless conversation through hundreds of years of art, but especially this sort of theologically informed art. And I find that art about demons. I think it almost always enters into this conversation one way or another.
Yeah.
And that's why Faustus stories are my Achilles heel. That's why they are my favorite thing in the world besides you. They are just my favorite thing. So this movie has now entered that pantheon, and I think it did a pretty beautiful commentary on that genre as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, that's a really great way to think about it. This is like the one time where I agree this is in fact a Faust story. No, I'm kidding. Every other time you've talked about it, it's been compelling.
I've never done it for half an hour.
No. This was great. Yeah,
this was fun.
This movie is so good. It's very rewatchable too. Like if you've only seen it one time, watch it again. Like I mean, it's upsetting, obviously,
and you don't need to throw a master's degree at it. You can just sit on the couch and it will scare the dog shit out of you.
Exactly. Yeah, like some horror movies really lose their effectiveness when you've already seen them. This one only
no.
It just ages like wine.
You could watch it every day and it would still scare you.
Thanks for joining us. If you've seen this movie, let us know your thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Stay cool. I hope that you live somewhere that's not here.
Yes. Anywhere else.
Literally anywhere else. This is the worst. All right.
We will see you on Friday.
Okay. Bye.